Buenas noches, gente. Buenas noches. Buenas noches. Voy acá a agregar a Marito. ¿Qué tal, Marito? ¿Cómo estás?
Muy buenas noches, argentinas, argentinos, argentines. Muy bien, ¿usted?
Muy bien acá. La verdad que muy contento. Es una noche muy especial porque pasamos los 30 y el número 31 tenía que ser muy especial también.
Muy especial, la
Muy
verdad que
especial.
sí.
Así que me parece que no vamos a dar muchas vueltas más. Vamos a presentar a nuestro invitado, que dicho sea de paso, acá arriba les voy a dejar cómo poner los subtítulos luego, cuando quede como video esta entrevista, y ustedes van a poder verla subtitulada. Así que vamos a empezar a hablar en inglés. Ya saben, si no lo hicieron, dejen su like. Si quieren contribuir, contribuyan. Si quieren unirse al canal como miembro, únanse. Pero vamos a presentar y vamos a hablar en inglés ahora.
Sí, señor.
I'm going to introduce you the one and only one of the, I think, the best editors in DC.
A legendary editor.
A legendary editor. We also interview Paul Davis, so another legendary editor. It's Mr. Dan Didio.
Thanks for having us. I always get nervous when they say it's legendary. I feel very old when you do that, but thank
you. When they use legendary, it's when you feel old. You feel old.
Well, when you realize you worked at a company for about 20 years, and that was it actually flew so quickly and seemed like such a short period of time, but it's amazing. I was there as long as I was. It was an incredible experience.
Yes, of course, it was an experience for you and for us, because you were in charge of a lot of heroes stories that impact in our life, because these our beloved characters in a new way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting because when I was brought in, it really was to shake things up and try new things and try to move the whole DC universe forward. And it was a lot of fun doing it. A lot of great people I had a chance to work with during that period of time. And I can honestly say in the 20 years that I was with DC, I pretty much had a chance to work with nearly every single character they ever had. And some of the last things I was doing was working on with Keith Giffen and Jeff Lemire on Inferior 5, a new take on that. And I figure when you do Inferior 5, you pretty much run out of characters to play with. So I was very happy to be able to be involved in as many things as possible.
Dan, and for a start, we always ask our guests a question that it's, how you got into comics? What's your first contact with the comics?
Well, there's a question. Okay, I'll put it back to you first. Are you talking about getting into comics as a fan or getting into comics as a professional?
As a fan.
Okay. As a fan. I can honestly tell you that I've been reading comics for more than 50 years. I probably had my first comics when I was 10 years old, but I actually had a lot of comics in my life even before that. I still own a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 40. Spidey Saves the Day, Spider-Man versus Green Goblin. Still keep my original. Doesn't have a back cover. It's beat to hell, but it's mine, and I would change it for the world. I was a big fan of the Spider-Man cartoon in the 60s. I watched Batman in the 60s as well. So as a young kid, I had seen superhero material. So, my parents would pick me up a random book here or there. But as I got a little bit older, 10, 11 years old, I became I really liked the horror movies and monster movies and things of that nature. And my brother and sister would pick me up copies of Where Monsters Prowl, and House of Mystery, House of Secret. And from there, I was more of a horror and monster fan, and then slowly got into the superheroes. But once I was there, I think at my peak, I was probably buying somewhere between 40 to 50 books a month for the longest time because I enjoy reading them. Yeah. It was I was out of control. I admit it, but I was happy.
But you read a lot of stuff that later became some stories that they were legend. Periods of time, pieces of stories, like I don't know. You said Spider-Man, the death, when Stacy's death, and everything. So you live those experiences.
Oh yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, I always loved comics, not just comics books and the characters and the stories, but also the business of comics. I used to read all the fanzines, all the backstories about how the books were made, and I was always fascinated by it. I was the kid that would go out and buy all the books that had the sales numbers in them. They used to. I don't know if you know this, but when they sold books at the newsstand in the United States, they had to post and list how the book sold over the course of the year. So every year there would be a listing of sales figures, and I used to get the sales figures to see how these books sold. Not for any other reason. I just found it fascinating to see which books were more popular than others. So the backstory of comics has always been fascinating to me. So when I had an opportunity to work in comics, I had a lot of information that was just naturally inside me from just the things that I found fascinating when I was younger that I just looked for. So I took a lot of information with me when I joined DC, and it was interesting because when Paul Levitz brought me into DC, he needed somebody with outside experience, but understood comics, and I was able to check both those boxes.
Oh, it's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful story because you really love comics.
Yeah.
You
Oh
really
no, I
love
do.
comics.
Yeah, I mean, I've got I still have my collection in the garage. I've been trimming it down a little because I've been moving from coast to coast in the U.S. So it's hard to carry this stuff all around with you. But I still have a dedicated, I would say probably 60 boxes of comics still that I consider the core of my collection. I don't know I don't think I could cut it down any more than that. That's my heart and soul in those 60 boxes. Yeah.
It's awesome that you tell us about that you are really a collector and a comic book reader for life, actually.
Yeah.
And it's something that gives us the idea that when you began doing your thing on DC or any other editorial, it's because you really love what you're doing, and you're giving everything on that, and that's something important.
I think that the hardest thing about that is what you love about comics and what other people love about comics. Not always the same thing. And when you step into a job, you have your opinion of the things you love and the things you want to protect and just be able to do. But the truth be told is, my interests might not align with what the general public's interests are. As you can see, the things that I wrote over the years, I love the Metalman, I love Phantom Stranger, I love OMAC, I love all these weird little characters that never had much success in the business. Those are the things that excite me. So you have to find a way. I have to find a way to basically be objective and to understand what the audience is looking for, and then find a way to build the best projects. And it's funny when fans to come to me said, "Well, I didn't like that book," and I say to them, "I didn't like it either." And they look at me and said, "How can you do a book you don't like?" And I said, "Because it's not for me; it's for an audience." We created, at the top of my time there, we were making about 70 comics a month. First of all, you can't buy them all; it's just too expensive. But the reality is, when you have 70, you have to do them for as many people, as diverse an audience as possible, because you're trying to keep a wide berth of people involved in what you do. You don't want to just narrow it into a small group. You want to be accepted by as many people as possible. So you have to get past your own tastes and build books that you believe people really want to consume, whether you would purchase it or you're not.
And also you trust into the people you gave the titles, right? You have the liberty to work with the characters because you trust in those writers, artists, and everything else.
You have to trust everybody. Like I said, when you're doing that much product, it's impossible to be that much on top of and control every single thing. So you have to believe in letting people be able to build their books. And I always say, I knew where a book started, and I knew where a book needed to end. But the journey what the character took and the type of story that went through there, you have to give that control over to the people who write it and draw it, and let them find their path to tell that story. You know, it might not be the one you would have told, but if it works for the character, then you need to let them tell their story so they feel vested and they feel ownership of what they do. Because the last thing people want to be doing in a creative environment is doing something they don't feel is creative. So you got to let them express themselves and find their voices, whether you agree with it or not. You have to give them that leeway. Most of the time I spent when we started a book is myself with the editors come up with the concept of what we wanted to do. We would reach out to different talent to hear what they say. We'd work out the early stages of what this was about, and then you'd hand it off and just let it go. And sometimes it works great. A lot of times it doesn't work great, but that's the fun part about comics. You can constantly reinvent the wheel and constantly try different things. And we should always be trying things different. We shouldn't be just doing the same thing over and over again. We always have to find a way to progress and move the stories forward. These characters, they're 70, 80 years old. They were created at a time with sensibilities that might not apply for today. So you need to find what's relevant and what's important of those characters and what's relatable and what people like about them, and then find a way to reinvent them in a way that feels fresh and new and speaking to today's audience.
Dan, you joined DC 2002, I think.
Yep.
And you began your journey on DC working on Superboy.
Sort of. It's actually a little different.
Tell us the story about how you got into this comic and you end this comic, because it was like, I don't know, six issues.
Yep. So here's the story. Jimmy Palmiotti and I lived in the same building back in Brooklyn, New York together. And so we knew each other, and I knew Jimmy worked in comics. He knew I liked comics. I was working in television at the time. But we were trying to find ways to create books, to create an idea and pitch ideas together. And we pitched an idea, and it didn't work. And we put it aside, which was a new take on the Guardian character. Oh. So as the story goes, as the story goes, Jimmy had some success with Deadpool, and then DC reached out to him again and said, "Do you have anything you'd like to pitch us?" So Jimmy called me and says, "Can you bring me the Guardian pitch? I think DC's interested." So we brought him the Guardian pitch, and they said, "Hey, we like this pitch, but we'd love for you to have a supporting cast character in there. Could you put another superhero in it?" So naturally, we put Superboy in it. So we sent the script back again. They said, "Hey, we love this stuff with Superboy. Can you push the Superboy stuff up, make him a co-star of this story with the Guardian?" And we said, "Sure." We did that. We sent it in again. And they said, "Hey, we love this pitch completely. I ask one favor. Could you take the Guardian out and just make it a Superboy story?" and I called Jimmy up. I said, "Jimmy, are we writing Superboy?" And Jimmy goes to me, "Shut up and turn the script in."
So you have to switch it all the stories.
So we got the job working on Superboy. Independent of that, I was looking for a career change. I was working on the West Coast, trying to get back to the East Coast. And a mutual friend of mine set me up on I always say it, he set me up on a blind date with Paul Levitz. I went to meet him for dinner, and instead I wound up having dinner with Paul Levitz. And Paul, again, was looking for somebody with outside experience. And during the course of I did 6 interviews with Paul before I got the job. And I think it was on the second or third interview, I'm sitting in his office, and Paul goes to me, he goes, "Have you ever done any work in comics at all?" And I go, I go, as a matter of fact, I'm co-writing Superboy right now. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, and he had this big rack of comics behind him. And I never forgot, he turns around, pulls the book off the rack, looks at it, stares at it, closes, he goes, damned if you aren't one of the writers. And he goes, okay, next question. And so we were off. So ultimately, I wound up getting the job independent of Superboy while writing it. And strangely, my first official act at DC was canceling my own book. There was a lot of reasons behind that, but the truth was the book wasn't selling. And it was basically to make a point saying that I'm more than willing to lead by example, cancel my own material if I didn't believe it was working or selling enough. And we should all be looking at our books with the same objective point of view. And that was the start of the reinvention of how we were going to be doing business at DC.
Mm-hmm. You know something? Sorry, you know something here on the chat. They love you. They send you a lot of love to you, Dan. So all the people here and the chat is talking about how good
it's thrilled.
They are thrilled. Really.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. This is a lot of fun. Hi there.
Hi, Dan. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
They can't believe you're talking with us.
Oh, no.
Actually, they can't believe it.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm still awake this late at night.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for
so
being
much
awake for us. After Superboy ended, you also got the chance to redeem that cancellation because you relaunched 2 books with graduation day during that day.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about how did it come up the story? How did you met Jeff Johns for this book and Judd Winnick, for example?
Yeah. It was interesting. I mean, when I first got there, I was the outsider coming into the company, and there was a lot of people there working together for an extraordinary period of time. And here I am, an outsider coming in, trying to tell them what to do. So I had a lot of friction with the staff, and we had to make a statement, and we had to make a way to work. And again, like I said, I canceled Superboy, but I also canceled Young Justice around the same time, and the Titans book also. And the reason why I felt that, quite honestly, that Teen Titans, especially the way I remember it from the 80s, was the premier book of DC. It was sold better than Justice League. It sold better than everything. It was the book. So the fact that it was languishing with low sales, I found troubling, to be honest with you. So I was constantly trying to push and find ways to reinvent things. And I developed a very tight rapport with Jeff, with Judd, and also with Greg Rucka. Those were my guys. And ultimately, if the editors weren't going to listen to me, we were going to work this together. And during that period of time, I always like to point this out because this is important. I think Greg was writing Wonder Woman, one of the Superman books, and maybe Checkmate or something else. He had three books.
Yeah.
Jeff had Teen Titans, Green Lantern, Justice Society, and he was co-writing Justice League for a period of time with another writer. Judd Winnick had Batman, Outsiders, Green Arrow, and something. So between those guys, between the three of them, they were working about 14 titles that they were involved in. And not just 14 titles, but all of the main characters. So through them, we were able to build a story, an interconnected story, because they were working so well together and they were controlling all the main characters, that all the big books were beating with the same heartbeat. They were moving in the same fashion. They were moving the entire DC universe. So then when that started to happen and they saw success, other people tried to join in and started to build this much more cohesive universe that you saw during those early days when I first got there, from like 2004 almost to through 2009, probably is when it all came together. But it was really this wonderful thing. You saw it developing. You saw the hunger and the desire and the love that these three guys had for these characters, and they were able to put them on their shoulders. And then we bring in people like Gail Simone, and we bring in Grant Morrison, and all of a sudden we've got this motion and this energy and this excitement across the line. But you go back to Teen Titans. Teen Titans was a very important moment for us. So what happened was, normally the logic behind DC was, if you cancel the book was bad, you got to put it on a shelf for a long time and let people get excited about it again, and you bring it back over. And you saw it time and time again with things like Aquaman and Hawkman, these books that would play for a while, get canceled, disappear, come back, play for a while, get canceled. And what happened was, we wanted and needed a Teen Titans book, but we didn't like what was happening with Titans and Young Justice. So I said to everybody, we got to end these two books, come up with a little story, and then launch two brand new books that make more sense with two different personalities and attitudes. And the word came back saying, you shouldn't do that. You got to let it sit for a while. And we said, no, we got good stories, and we're going to go out there and we're going to send a message that these things are valuable and important titles again. And so we did it. We did the graduation day story. I got into trouble for that one. I sort of made a promise saying I wasn't going to kill Donna Troy, and we sort of killed Donna Troy. We added these 2 pages in the back of the story to make it look like she was sort of still alive in Valhalla or somewhere. Yeah, that didn't fly. But the bottom line is, I got this little mini series, and then all of a sudden we got Titans and Outsiders, and they launch, and they sell out, and we make more copies, and they sell out. Then we make more copies, and then they sell out, and then we make more copies, and they sell out. I think Titans went back for 6 printings, and all of a sudden you could feel the change. It started with Green Lantern, and then you got Titans and Outsiders, and all of a sudden says, if you build the book correctly with the right talent and give it the right push, it can work. So all of a sudden, we weren't building books to just work and then ultimately fail at some point. We were building books to be successful and to carry the line. And that's sort of where that started. But Titans and Outsiders was a big 2. I mean, we were set to go with Teen Titans. I think I'll tell you honestly, there's a line in Teen Titans that probably in 20 years of DC, still my favorite line in all the comics we made. And it's where Robin, I forget who it is. It's one of them. It's either Raven or someone says to Robin, he goes, you just lied to Cyborg. And Robin looks at him and goes, I lied to Batman. And all of a sudden, Robin was the coolest character that we had in the DC universe at that moment, with one simple line. And that's all it takes to define a character. You don't need pages of exposition. You just need clarity in your voice and in what these characters say. And that was something Jeff wrote, which I thought was brilliant. The other line I thought Jeff wrote, which was brilliant, was in Infinite Crisis #1, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are fighting, and Batman's really pissed. So he basically says to Superman, the last time you inspired anybody was when you were dead. And bang, again, cuts them to a bone. And that type of surgery and that clear understanding is what wins the day. That shows you we know who these characters are and how they think and speak. And when you get that trust in the fans, they'll follow you wherever you take them.
In that period when you are speaking about when you began with Teen Titans, when you began with Green Lantern, with Outsiders, I wasn't reading comics, but those titles, those writers, and all the books that were coming out make me come back to reading comics. For a long time, I think it was like 4 or 5 years that I didn't read comics, and I began reading comics again when I I pick up. I think it was Green Lantern Rebirth, and I think yeah, it was Green Lantern Rebirth,
Yeah.
I thought, hey, this is good. This is good. As I remember, it was years ago, and it began. I think it's the 2000. I think
4, probably about
2003.
2004. Green Lantern Rebirth, Identity Crisis are probably the two books I identify as the start of what we wanted to build. And Green Lantern was again. Green Lantern was a big fight to put Hal Jordan back in the costume because they spent so much time killing him and trying to build Kyle Rayner. And I remember my pitch. My pitch was, I said, you sit here and you're saying that Hal Jordan's not important. There shouldn't be Green Lantern. And I said, well, here's the thing. I've seen him in more comics since he's been dead than when he was alive. And you think about it. He's in flashbacks. He was in a Brave and Bold series with Flash. He's back. Hell, and they make Hal Jordan the Spectre, and he's wearing the Green Lantern mask and symbol. I said, he's a ghost. Why is he wearing a mask? He can't let go. So if you can't let go of this character, at least make him the character that people want him to be, which was Green Lantern. And it's not to say that Kyle Rayner wasn't important. We had other Green Lanterns too. It's just that Hal was the better Green Lantern. He was the first there that people remembered the most. And it was important to get that to a character where it made sense without disregarding everything that came before him. And again, a lot of people didn't want to go back to that. They thought there was a problem with the Green Lantern Corps. They thought there was a problem with Hal. And all we said no, the problem was the stories you were telling and how you were telling them. Let's start over and start again and tell stories that work.
After I fall in love with Green Lantern when you launch Secret Origin after Rebirth. So I really love that story about the Corps and everything like that. It's amazing story, and you did it very, very well in that time because
it's easy when you come in and you're asked to change things and you have a lot of ideas and you have people in locked in with your sensibility. We went away. It was Jeff, myself, Judd, and Greg, and one of the editors. We all went away for a weekend, and we went into a studio and literally mapped out the DC universe. And what I used to do, and I still have them, believe it or not. What I used to do is every year I would do a chart for the DC universe. And I wouldn't look at the books as individuals. I looked at the universe as a whole, as a big story, and then what characters could play into the story. And I would talk to all the talent. I would talk to all the editors. I would hear what everybody was thinking. And then I sat down and I built a big storyline out of it. And then I found what I considered story engines to drive the bigger picture. And the logic was that every 3 months or so, you would build to crescendo. There'd be an event or something that happens that all the heroes would unite around. Then they would all go back to their own books and their own stories. Then 3-4 months later, boom, you all come back together. You all refer. And it's not that they all cross over. It's just that they refer to things. It's like, oh, did you hear Martian Manhunter exploded in the Justice League Tower? Don't have to show it. But if you acknowledge it and said that it occurred, then it shows you that it's a shared universe. They don't have to share the moments and events. They just have to share the knowledge that they're in the same place. And that was what we were trying to do. So we were always trying to refer to other things to show that these people were aware that there was other heroes existing in their world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the true feeling of continuity.
Yeah.
When you read comics and you feel that it's a shared universe, and the things that some characters do on a book has some repercussions on others.
Yep.
That worked very good in the 90s. I remember with the Superman books, for example.
Although it was brilliantly run, the 4 books like that, and and that was one of my templates for the 52 weekly series. When I wanted to put out a book as fast as we delivered comics, which was weekly. And that was a lot of work, but it was. I think the final product, I think, still speaks for itself. It's still something that people remember very fondly.
Dan, it was difficult for you trying to fix all the things of the continuity of DC and try to fill all the holes and everything, because we are, as readers, we have some things. Oh, wait a minute, this thing is happening. What? So it was difficult to you try to fix everything.
Yeah, the DC is particularly difficult because of the constant restarts, and also the way the company was run. It was broken down into editorial camps that each group ran its own set of characters and stories independent of the others. So there really wasn't that much crossover. And when it did occur, it felt forced, which was disappointing. So we had to go in with a different logic. And that's why I built the big story and let it trickle down rather than trying to push everybody into another story. But for me, like I said, the continuity, I think, is what people remember, but it can get overwhelming. And you talk about fixing them. That's why we came up with Superboy Prime's punch. Yeah, one punch solves it all. That doesn't work. God damn it, he punched that wall again.
you know that punch was very criticized because it was like, why a punch can, I don't know, resurrect Jason Todd? That's a reality. What was that?
It's Superman, right?
You know what resurrected Jason Todd? Sales figures.
Of course.
Yeah.
And in that time, you were also with Loeb and Jim Lee on Hush. That was a huge success.
Well, I always say Jim Lee saved my ass. Oh, totally. He's the one who saved me more than anything else. And why I say that is, when I first started at DC, my background was all television. I was in TV for 20 years, working in children's programming, animation, and things of that nature. Like I said, I knew comics, but I never worked in comics. So when I first got there, and then I got the position as executive editor, a lot of people had that job before me, were people who worked their way through the ranks. They were assistant editors and then full editors, and then they graduated into that position. So they knew how the company worked from the ground up. I was coming in top down, and I had to learn it. I had to get on the bottom and then learn my way up to the top very quickly. And while I was doing that, you make mistakes. You make launches. You try different things that don't work. And that's problematic. But what happens is this beautiful little book called Hush, running in Batman, story in Batman. And Jim was brilliant because what Jim did, and this is really important. This is very important. So at that time, a lot of people were doing miniseries that were special and off to the side, and you get these very prestigious book, Long Halloween. You get all these different things that are very prestigious, but all done off the main line. So what happened was you were siphoning off the best talent to work on miniseries, but your main books, the ones you have to put out every month, you weren't putting your big name talent on it because they were doing other things. So when Jim comes on board, Hush was going to be just like Long Halloween, prestige format, off to the side, 12-part series. Oh. And Jim, to his credit, goes, no, I want to be the Batman artist. I want to be the Batman artist. He goes, I want to be the Batman artist. The only way I'm the Batman artist is if I'm on the monthly book. Nothing else. That's where it matters most, he said. And everybody goes, well, we're not going to launch you with a number one. He goes, I don't care. Give me any number. I'll make it sell better than a number one. And that's
that's confidence, man.
But hey, you sell you know what? You sell 8 million copies of X-Men, you get to be a little confident. So all of a sudden, Jim steps onto Batman, and the book sells and sells and sells. All of a sudden, it's a monster, and all the mistakes I'm making on the rest of the line, nobody sees it because all they see is that success of Batman and Jim on it. And then all of a sudden, we get Superman Batman from Loeb and McGinnis, and that sells. Now we got 2 wheels on this car. You know what I mean? We got 2 wheels on the car, and all of a sudden, you feel something. there's a good buzz for DC. People are talking about us again. People are getting excited about DC again. And that gives you confidence, So instead of making the little mistakes over here and there, we start to put all our energy on the main books, and that's when Green Lantern comes on. And then all of a sudden, we're cooking with gas. and then you feel like it's starting to really happen. And I turned that burner up full blast. And we had that machine running as hot as it could for the longest period of time, because we saw that we had a moment, and we saw that we had the fans' interest, and we didn't want to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That moment, it was this moment, because when you go full throttle to the end of the race and began with this incredible event, Identity Crisis, that for me is something that changed comic books in DC and the way I saw comics.
Countdown to Into the Earth is possibly my single favorite book that I did at DC, and it's early in my career there, but it's everything that I believed we should do. And again, if you look at the names of the talents associated with it, their writing are Jeff and Judd and Greg. They write that book together, and they're setting up all the key storylines that are going to get me to Infinite Crisis. We're setting up Rand Thanagar War. We're setting up the Avengers. We're setting up all these different storylines. Little known fact was that, uncredited, we had 3 different writers working on the book. And because of that, the tones were a little different because of the way they write. And actually, Brad Meltzer came in and did a pass on the entire story, the dialogue, just to smooth it out, so that he helped me smooth it out so that it read smooth from beginning to end, so it didn't feel like we were shifting teams. And that's why it almost feels seamless inside that title.
Mm-hmm.
Great book. All-time favorite.
That book, Countdown.
Countdown is amazing.
It's emotional. It's tough. It's surprising. It's very important for the comic book fan, because and also here's one of the big question and the controversy, that was that the given character, the given JLA, was dying one after one.
Not
Blue Beetle.
I couldn't kill enough of them. That's my only shame. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's interesting. I mean, the Blue Beetle and Booster Gold. I mean, it was fascinating because Blue Beetle was a very loved character, but it was a very abused character in the comics. If you follow the comics, they had him have a heart attack. He gets fat. They're doing all these terrible things to him, yet they say they love him, which I didn't understand.
In the Superman death, they beat him up to hell.
Yeah, and so the truth is, what I wanted to show is just how dangerous it was to be a hero, And one of the way the story works was that he is solving the greatest mystery of the DC universe, and nobody else does it. And people have come to me saying, they said, this is until the ending, it's one of the best Blue Beetle stories they've ever read. He's heroic, he's smart, he's energetic, he's unrelenting, he's trying to do everything to solve what was happening, and he gets there. He finds out what the big mystery is. He uncovers it, and then he dies. He gets killed. And the logic was, even no matter how good you are, sometimes you're not good enough. And as a hero, you can die. And once you did that, all bets are off. Everybody said, I don't know what's going to happen next, which is the greatest thing you can hear as a creator. If they can't anticipate your moves, but it's true to the characters and stories, and they're excited and want to follow it, we got them, and we're not going to let them go. We're going to take you on this ride that promise you is going to be the greatest comic experience of your life.
What happened when you read it for the first time?
You know what? I felt real. There's a weird thing for me. There's this calming effect. When something works, I don't get super excited. I get super calm. And the reason why is that your expectations have been met. And sometimes in this one, exceeded. It's better than I thought it could ever be. And it's like, when you see it realized on the paper the way you want it to come out, and it's there, it's like, holy crap! I can't believe it's almost like you can't believe you pulled it off, more so than I got it done. I can tell you dozens of times where I was disappointed about something I thought it was going to be, and it didn't turn out that way. This is one of those cases where it was actually better, and we spent an inordinate amount of time. We worked on this a lot, and we worked that, and we were there's rewrites upon rewrites on that one. We really worked that book because we all knew it was so important. And I had the company's backing. It was a 80-page book for $1. I knew it was going to be a big deal. I had two covers, one with the character who's dead on the cover in shadow, the other one in light. I got Alex Ross to do it with Jim Lee. I was pulling out every freaking every promise, every bet, everything I could to get that thing done. It's a special moment. For me, it's still that moment where everything I hoped comics can be was realized in a way that I saw it, and you feel good about it. Yeah, and Blue Beetle's dead. I know, so and you sit there going, somebody's going to bring him back. I never wanted to bring him back ever, never, because it was one of those things. It was one of those things. Brought back Supergirl, but I didn't want to bring back Blue Beetle.
Also, there's I think it's an urban legend about the ending of Infinite Crisis and about Nightwing's death.
Yes.
Is it true? Is it true that
absolutely
Nightwing was gonna die?
Yeah. I still believe Nightwing should have died. I still do. Still do. And let me explain why. Okay, need to explain. Story. This is because if you follow characters in story, just like I said, Blue Beetle died there because he wasn't good enough to stop Max Lord at that moment. I'm going to say that I was dealing with a storyline where Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman fractured. They all were at odds with each other. They stopped talking. They stopped dealing with each other. They came apart. And because of that, it fractured the whole infrastructure of how all the heroes work together. And because of that, nobody was working in their best way. They were uncoordinated. And because of that, everything was in peril. The universe was in danger. And not only that, but they were being judged, and they were being judged as being weak because of their behavior. And I needed something to pull all the characters back together again, something really dramatic. Because think about it. The world's about to end. The universe is about to be destroyed. All this stuff is happening. And that didn't bring Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman back together again. If that doesn't bring them back, then what would? And it had to be that level of emotional moment that needed to pull them together. And the one character that intersected on the closest level possible was Nightwing. He had the relationship with Wonder Woman. He had the relationship with Superman. He had the relationship with Batman. And on top of that, we've been desperate to have him replaced 17 times over with multiple versions of other Robins. And so in some ways, he was being the redundant. He wasn't quite Batman. He wasn't quite Robin. And even Nightwing, he was leading a team in the same manner he was when he was Robin. So nothing really changed about the character. So there's this moment here where I wanted the ultimate sacrifice by the ultimate hero, one of the heroes there, somebody who was important. And for me, there's no greater loss than the loss of a child. And these older heroes seeing the younger hero sacrificing himself in a way would be so horrible and heartbreaking to them that everything else shouldn't matter except that you share this grief together, and understanding that their grief might have caused this, and if they didn't create this problem, he might have still been alive. And for that, it became this bonding reaffirmment of their being heroes again, and saying that this is the moment that we have to realize we have to be heroes and true to ourselves, and put aside the petty differences and put aside things and service and honor him. And it was that moment. And I think it would have been a tearjerker. I honestly did. It would have been, it would have been that moment. But because of the legacy character and because of the history with Dick Grayson and because of everything, company got cold feet. And we had to pull a switch at the end. But I still think story-wise, I think it would have made a better story, a better ending. Although I have to say it still works brilliantly.
Yeah, but it would be it would be terrible. I mean, for me, it would be I would be heartbreaked.
That's
I
part
would
of
be crying. I would be crying a lot like a child.
I had a whole thing where Jason Todd came back and he was going to be a terrible Nightwing. That's what's going to be the next beat too. By the way,
But there was something that you tried, and that was 1 year later.
Yeah.
In 1 year later, when he tried to take the mantle of Nightwing, and speaking about 1 year later, I got a question. It's a short question.
Sure.
What was the deal with 52 and 1 year later, and when they were finishing the 52 series, it really doesn't fit the the reality that they
you noticed that, huh?
you guys put 1 year later. It was like,
okay.
I got three issues left. And
This is a very easy explanation. Okay, there was actually a reason. So the plan was 1 year later, and we spent again a lot of time figuring out how it was going to look and what the jump was going to be and all these things. But the 1 year later jump for each book was left to the editors and the talent to come up with a 1 year later jump. And the truth be told is some people took a lot of energy and made it a very important story jump. And there was real change taking place. It's something that could be completely different. And some people didn't put as much effort into it. Oh, I was asleep for a year. Oh, I was in a bubble for a year. I was doing something else for a year. They didn't get that same level of energy because, and I'm going to tell you why. What happens is with writers and artists is if they're working on a story and they know that story is going to end and it's going to be completely replaced by a brand new story, they spent all their time wrapping up the old story and instead of spending their energy launching the new idea. So by the time they got to launch the new idea, they didn't have an idea. So they just did something superfluous. Now we have a weekly series that's supposed to set up, right? Supposed to set up what the missing year was and how all these changes occurred. So when the writers sat down, they looked through all the 1 year later jumps and they came to me very concerned and said, there's no story here. We got nothing. We couldn't fit. There was nothing of a through line. There was nothing to tie it all together. We've got nothing to tell. And we've got 52 issues to fill. Okay. So I said, well, here's what you got. Let's go with it and see what you can make work, but build some of your own stories around it. And the team breaks down. One person gets the Adam Strange storyline with Starfire here. The other one's Black Adam over there. There's the other story with Elongated Man. So everybody's got a storyline. And then the issue comes in, and I never forgot this. And there's a giant hawk girl on the cover. And I'm like, what? Where did the giant hawk girl come from? We never mentioned there was a giant hawk girl. And I had to make a choice. Do I tell the team to adhere to what they did, what other people did, and sacrifice what their story is going to be? Or do I just go, guess what, guys? 1 year later, tell whatever great story you could do, and at the end of the year, we'll figure out how to tie it all together. Guess which one I picked?
Yeah, smart decision.
It was.
I'm making fun of it now. It was a very hard decision. I knew the implications, but I also knew how important the 52 weekly series were, how much of my reputation was on it, how much of the talent's reputation was on it, how hard everybody was working to make that work. I could not sacrifice it. And in truth be told, 52 hurt the line in a weird way because there was so much energy on 52 and the writers were so focused on that some of the other wheels on the bus started coming off a little bit. But 52 as a body of work is still one of the high points of my time at DC.
Oh, and it was an immense talent work, because you got a lot of names, a lot of artists. It was an incredible job you guys did there.
I came from an animation background. And it was run as a 52. The weekly series was run as a television show. That's how I did it. It was basically, we had a writer's room, we had storyboard artists, we were able to move product around to different people who was ever available to help us. So it really was a very communal property with a lot of people moving and a lot of people on top of it working as a unit. Something that we had never done to this extent before. I mean, they did it on the Superman line, but those were 4 books. And granted, there was 4 books within the body of a single character story. This was basically the entire DC universe being run by a small team, for a year, for a whole year.
And you say that this was the high point, but I thought this was your high point.
Here we go. It's 2 different high points. Okay, if you look at my time at DC, it breaks down into me as an executive editor and me as a publisher. Okay. So the time between Infinite Crisis and the 52 and all that is my executive editor high point. 52, the launch of the line is my publisher high point, because what we did was restarting the entire line of books. And it forced the entire company, not just the talent, but the company, production, marketing, sales, every aspect of the company to work together as a unit to launch the entire line over again. And that required such level of coordination and such a level of interaction with the company that it really brought us together as a single unit. We had just gone through a management change, so a lot of people there was a little anxious and anxiety running in the building. And this relaunch helped us all refocus on the books again and stop worrying about everything else, and refocus on the books and create something that everybody was extraordinarily proud of. And I think I keep on saying that, but pride is so important, and ownership and the value you bring to things is so important to keep people motivated and excited about doing something like this day in and day out, because there is no break in comic. There's no time off. People do a movie and then they go away for a couple of years and they do another movie after that, or you take 6 months off in the middle of a TV show. We got to put a book out. We can't even enjoy the success of a book because we got to go out and put the next 10 books out after that. So to be able to bring everybody together and to focus on something that we could celebrate, and to have that stamped moment in time when those first books come out, and the relaunch was massively successful. Every book sold out. Every book went to a second printing, and that's 52 titles. And everybody, there's not a single person who worked at DC at the time that didn't have their fingerprints on that and a sense of pride that they were involved in that launch, which was great.
Mm-hmm. And you got there a lot of people, a lot of talent. Grant Morrison on Superman, Scott Snyder, everyone. He was
Grant is one of the guys I consider a friend. Probably one of the most talented people in comics. Not only that, he's just one of the most talented people. Period. And I think what's interesting about Grant is, you're not going to believe this, he's a bigger comic nerd than I am. Do you know? Grant Morris is one of the few people that came over to my house and we went through the comic boxes together, looking at different books that we wanted to read and talk about things like that. That's kind of, and you're like, am I really doing this with Grant Morrison? Oh, you remember this issue? I love this issue, and and thank God I understand the Scottish accent. But Grant is such a talent. I can never speak highly enough of him. He says. He tells me the most logical, crazy things in the world, but when he says them, they make sense. And I said this, what's unique about Grant is it's not only the crazy stories, but the attitude behind them. And you can tell there's love of comics there. He always came back to comics in, always being offered in other positions. And you see people of his same stature, moving off into film or TV or somewhere else, but Grant's love of comics always kept him there. And, I've also been a very lucky person with Batman. You know, I had Jim Lee on Batman. I had Judd Winnick on Batman. I had Grant Morrison for 7 years on Batman. I had Scott Snyder on Batman. I just, you know what I mean? It's just, this is the most important character, and I'm happy to say that he was always in good hands. It's for my whole time there. I never had to worry about Batman, it's really important, because if you don't have, you know, I always tell you there's a way you have to say, like, Superman's supposed to sell, Batman's supposed to sell, Justice League's supposed to sell. So if you don't know how to sell those books, you got a problem and you got to fix it. But if those books are selling, then you get a chance to make other books sell. And if a Hawkman sells or an Aquaman sells that's not supposed to sell, that's a monster win. And when you have these guys taking advantage, you have these people who are taking good care of these big characters up here, you can concentrate on the other ones and find a way to make them work too. And then the line starts to really just, you know.
You introduce one of the fans' favorites is Justice League Dark.
Yeah.
It's an amazing title.
Yeah, it was great, because that originally started as Shadow Pact, with coming out of Infinite Crisis. That started that role. It was, if you want to follow the lineage, it goes all the way back to Day of Vengeance, you know. And the logic was in Infinite Crisis, and the idea of Infinite Crisis wasn't that it was going to be the sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Infinite Crisis, the original concept was, what if multiple crises occurred at the same time? And if you look at it, there's something that challenges the world, something challenges outer space, something challenges the heroes directly, and then something challenges the mystic world. And when you look at it, you go, well, what's the most important one? And I started to define the characters by determining what was important to them. Where would they go? And then when you start to see these characters aggregate or gather around a particular theme, it allows you to create a book where it shows that all these characters have the similar purpose. And, you know, while they might be different in who they are, but they have a similar purpose about what they're trying to stop or change. So that was Day of Vengeance was the mystic realm, when the Spectre goes crazy. And ultimately that gives us Shadow Pact, and then Shadow Pact ultimately gets us Justice League Dark, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, it gave a lot of readers, a lot of new readers, a new generation of readers actually really love this New 52 era, because it was the era that introduced them to comics.
Yeah, that was the purpose. That was the plan. If you said it yourself, with the time with Infinite Crisis and Green Lantern coming back, that was to bring back lapsed readers, people who used to read and went away, you know. And then when we got those guys, we needed new people. So ultimately, New 52 was, how do we get new people? And that was the logic there, is to create an entry point where they feel they could come in and they don't feel shut out from the storytelling.
I still remember the first issue of New 52, Justice League, when Superman came in the last page. It was awesome, really awesome.
It is, and that was great. And I actually absolutely loved Grant's take on Superman. You know, Grant loves metafiction. He believes that every story fits into continuity somewhere. That's why he's able to write things like Multiversity. But that Superman with the boots and the jeans is the same Superman in his mind who does All-Star Superman later on. And he had that character's history mapped out from beginning, middle, and end, which was brilliant. You know, stories that never made it, but he knows where these story points are. So he's always working to his own story sensibilities and continuity when he's building characters like that, because he knows ultimately how they're going to turn out. So he can create all these great beats that work for the character, but take on a much larger personality and much value when you see how they play against his other stories with the same character.
Dan, and why was Green Lantern the only book that didn't reboot it?
A couple of reasons. Hedging, we call it hedging our bets. I had a sales department. That was a little nervous that I was canceling everything that was successful. Not just canceling stuff that failed, but canceling stuff that was successful too. Two most successful titles we had at that time were Batman and Green Lantern, and therefore they got the least amount of change.
Yeah. That was something that I always think about it, because I thought it was a total reboot, and
Yeah.
it was strange because he continued the story. Also, Batman continued the story, including Grant Morrison's Batman Inc.
Yeah. And like I said, we were trying to find ways, when you have people following certain titles, you the last thing you want to do is, especially with the success of those books, is you don't want to turn them off completely. So you're trying to find a way to make it work within the body, and sometimes you can be more dramatic in it. And as the expression goes, the books that needed the most work got the most time spent on them. The ones that didn't get that same level. The reason why we spent a lot of time on Superman was because we felt we needed a sense of update that felt organic instead of forced. We've been trying a lot of things with him, and we were failing with it. So we wanted a clean start, and that's one of the reasons why I gave it to Grant. Grant had a clear understanding of Superman, better than most other people, and it was important for him to be the guy leading that charge.
Dan, initially the New 52 was a huge success, and in that era, some books lasted till 52, and other fell in the way. And what's, in your opinion, the high points and the low points of 52, the New 52?
Well, New 52, I think the high point is the first year. Probably, in first 2 years, but the first year in particular. The reality is we spent a lot of time. Again, just like I told you the 1 year later jump, I'm gonna repeat myself again. We spent a lot of time launching these series, okay, and preparing ourselves, and we mapped them out, and we thought the stories through, and we thought where the changes were, and we got rid of just superficial changes, and then we wanted to make some real dramatic things and address what was weak about characters and find ways to enhance them and make them better. And you talk about Batman and Green Lantern. I'll talk to you about Swamp Thing and Animal Man, which I think were the two giant standouts of that. You know what I mean? Things that were really felt fresh coming out of the gate. Aquaman too, exactly. And again, things like that where I felt they really thought it through about where the character didn't work and how am I going to make it work great. So you have those books and you spend that time. And what happens is, and this is my own fault in some ways, I set a high threshold for cancellation, meaning if a book didn't sell X number of copies, it was canceled regardless. And because we had such success, I'm like, we're gonna try to lift this whole thing up, and we won't accept poor selling books. We're gonna muscle these things through and create new books to sell better. And what happened was we created what I called the churn, which the churn is, we had about 4 to 8 books at the bottom of the schedule, and no matter what they were, they just weren't going to get traction, And we just kept, and what we did, we started to spend more time trying to fix the bottom, and we lost sight of the top. And then as books started to get weaker on the top, we started to go, add pieces to it, add things. And the amount of time we did reinventing and improving and changing characters to be part of New 52 wasn't spent anymore. So somebody would find a character from the past, bring him in, change the color of his hair, and say, New 52, yay! And it didn't make a difference. And a bunch of fans going, wait a minute, that's the same guy. What? And everybody would get all upset. And all of a sudden, it started to get worse. And now the top starts to get weaker. And now they're trying to rush to put in things. And I'll be very honest, I had a lot of writers not wanting to be part of 52. They didn't want to change the stories. They didn't want to reinvent the characters. They wanted their versions that they grew up with on these books. So you're fighting to get new stuff. They're not putting it on there. And the truth be told is 52 should have been 40, 48, to be honest. And if we had kept it a little bit tighter, a little bit smaller, I think it would have been ran a lot longer and would have been even more successful. Because the truth be told is the numbers of books we create is based on a budget more so than creativity and talent available. And, in some ways, that becomes your shortfall because you're constantly forced to make decisions that for financial reasons than for creative reasons. And that could come back and bite you, but that's that's the job of the publisher. You have to make those decisions. Yeah, you're responsible to that budget. So
Yeah.
Also, Dan, you had a huge problem in the end. That was the moving from New York to Burbank.
Yeah, I mean the funny but not funny story, as I say. The funny story is when I first took the job of publisher, we were scheduled to move. Okay.
Oh.
So we were scheduled to move. So we were ready to go, and some of the staff had moved out there. And I built Flashpoint with half of the team. Flashpoint was going to be it. Flashpoint was built off of Age of Apocalypse, in case you're wondering. So, I had talked to Bob Harris and talked to him about Age of Apocalypse. I got all the knowledge. So the logic was we're going to do Age of Apocalypse across the entire DC universe. We got to move, and people are going to be all over the place and a lot happening. So I need a sub team to create a series of books to get us over the hump. So then we get there, we start over again. Okay. So the story goes, we're building Flashpoint, and all of a sudden the word comes down, we're not moving. And I got all this energy built into Flashpoint, and we're wondering, well, what are you going to do? And then, as the fates would have it, we took a look at sales. And not just DC's, but Marvel, the entire industry was down 15% from the previous year, 15 to 20%, something outrageous. And I remember this clearly because I was sitting with Jim and I said, Jim, we are not going to be the publishers that shut down DC. It ain't going to happen. We're not going to be those guys. I ain't going to be here to be that. That's not why we took the job. We got to do something dramatic. And that's how New 52 was born. And we came up with an idea, and we had this event that was changing time and changing, and we said, boom, that's our spot. And it didn't line up properly, but we found a way to get it to work a little bit. But that was our spot. So Flashpoint was originally to help the company move, but ultimately around be the launch point for New 52. And to this point, I always say it was originally the Great 48. Believe it or not. No lie, true story. It was the Great 48. And Jim said, let's go to 52. That's a lucky number for us because of the 52 weekly series. And that's how 52 was born. And we're like, we don't have a name for it. And we're all sitting there. We're all sitting there going, and everybody's going over, blah, 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 and we're all in this. We're in this big room, and everybody's fighting, and I'm just going, oh, fine, just make the New 52, get this shit over with.
Dan, we have a friend here, a friend and a colleague here on YouTube called Damian, that he's a very huge fan of the New 52. So they call his show "Crisis on Argentinian Earths," the New 52.
Perfect.
So he loves that story, and he loved those.
He's a huge fan. He's a huge fan of
fan.
that era because of what I told you earlier.
I had so much fun. I got a chance to write OMAC in that period of time. I loved it. I got to do Phantom Stranger. I loved that. I got to do New Origin for Eclipso. I was having a blast.
It's amazing.
And also you have the chance to work with Giffen on both books.
Oh yeah, me and Giffen, we go way back. So my first, listen, Keith, I got time. This is like a 3-part story. First one is first time I met Keith Giffen. He was the first creator I met while joining DC. Okay, so I joined DC Comics. I'm sitting in my office by myself. I don't know anybody. And Keith walks by. He goes, "You the new guy?" He sticks his head in my door. "You the new guy?" And I say, "I'm the new guy." He goes, run as fast as you can. Get away while you can. Run!" And then he left. And then the second time I'm working with him, I was editing him on Ambush Bug, and he turned in a full issue of making fun of me. Full issue, just nonstop riffing on me. And I'm like, you can't do this. you can't do this. And I said, you got to change these pages. And I put the book down, and I'll admit there was a lot happening at the time, and we forgot about the book. It was on my desk. We never turned it in, and we missed the deadline on the book because the pages. I had to get somebody else to redraw pages, and we wound up putting issue 7 out of a 6-part series, even though we never put out issue 6 of Ambush Bug. That's my second Keith story. My favorite Keith story is OMAC. And we had a blast working on it. We had a great rapport working on this. And it really was. I would do an outline, and he would do a layout, and then I would dialogue, and then we would go back and forth and fix it together. And it was issue 7, I believe. And this was a very personal issue for me because I really wanted to make this story work. I had a great idea. And I had a great idea on how this was going to work. And it was a Winnie the Pooh parody, and I was having a blast with it. And I called up Keith. I said, listen, this is the only time I'm going to give you a full script. No other time, but I need you to stick to the script. And he goes, no problem. I'll do that. Send it over. So I send him the script. And he calls me back and he goes, hey, Dan, a week later, he goes, I stuck to the script. I just made one change. And I said, what's your change, Keith? He goes, I added a 7-page Superman fight scene at the opening of your script. And I took your 20 pages and I put it down to 13. And I lost it. I'm screaming, what the? And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And I'm yelling. And he calmly says, take a look at my layouts. He goes, hey, take a look at my layouts and see if you're missing anything, right? So he sends it into me. I look at the layouts. He had it perfect. Every beat, every section, no compromise, no nothing. I was just overwriting, and he got me down to 13 pages on a 20-page script, right? And it was perfect. And I called him up. I said, Keith, you win. It works perfectly. Let's leave it as it is. You can draw it as it is. All good to go. I just have one question for you. I said, 7 pages of Superman and OMAC fighting. I said, what's that about? And he goes, you're the writer. You figure it out. And he hung up the phone. And that's Keith Giffen. Okay.
Now we get it how he wrote with JLI. JLI.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
I love it.
Hilarious.
I really love Keith. He's my favorite.
Actually, he's an original. He's one of the people I was closest to at DC. I would work with him any second of any day. He's that brilliant. You know what? He's one of those guys. He would sit in a room, just spit out ideas, and it didn't matter. And you just throw them at you. And he never took it personal if you didn't like it or not. He just kept going, kept on thinking until something finally clicked. And that's one of the reasons why I put him on NEW52. He's on 52, the weekly series. He was the storyboard guy, but he was basically the enforcer in the room to make sure everybody stayed on point, that they all stayed together. And he was the guy that if they couldn't figure it out, he figured it out for them. So he was the unsung hero on that book in the biggest way possible. He actually had to write a couple of scenes for some of the other talent that had some difficulty pulling their story together. So it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Dan, did you publish the story about the Justice League International, the coming back?
I think so. Yeah, we did. I did. Remember, I did Justice League Classified, and we did not necessarily the Justice League. We did a couple of series with that. It was a lot of fun because I also knew there was a real fan base for that book. But I always said that real fan base was built off of the fact of the original creators. So that's why we wanted those original creators on that series. There was another case where I was a huge fan of Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers' Batman detective run.
Yeah.
And yes. I was lucky enough to get them to do it, a follow-up series with those characters. And we were going to do another one, and then Marshall Rogers passed away, unfortunately, while working on the book. And while we could have still put it out, it just didn't feel right. So we wound up scrapping that. But it's sometimes I like to revisit things with creators that made comics great for me. That's one of the joys of the job. You get to play along those lines. Every once in a while you get to pull one of those. You don't do it at all. Every once in a while you get to do it.
You know that Justice League here in Argentina is very famous thanks of the Giffen and the Mateis run, because they published here in Argentina that league, the JLI.
Yeah, I can believe it.
So we love that series.
Oh, it was a breath of fresh air, that book, in its time. You know, I was a longtime reader of Justice League. It was probably one of the first DC superhero books I bought on a regular basis. But I can't say that I truly enjoyed and loved it. I sort of just read it. There's moments in there, the Len Wein stuff in the early 70s, with when he does brings back the Seven Soldiers of Victory. That's one of the best comics ever made. And then Steve Englehart did some really wonderful stuff and told a really funky, incredible secret origin of Justice League set in the 50s. And that was kind of cool because it was acknowledging aspects of superheroes that it didn't have. I appreciate. I don't know what to say about Justice League Detroit, but it was what it was. It was an idea. It probably looked good on paper. Justice League International. That early run, the first 20, 30 issues. Until breakdowns is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also published another thing of Justice League that we all love is with Darwin Cook's Justice League.
New Frontier.
Frontier.
Interesting story about New Frontier. New Frontier almost didn't get published. Yeah. So what happened was, as the story goes, before I got there, Darwin was doing New Frontier with his editor, Mark Chiarello. And he was telling the story as he saw it, as he remembered he wanted to tell it. And they had a problem because it didn't fit into the current continuity of DC. And they were asking Darwin to make changes to his story based on the current continuity of DC. And Darwin just said no. And they had about a book and a half, 2 books done, something like that. Beautiful. And they were in a drawer, buried. So every once in a while, I used to go around to the offices to see what the guys had in their drawer, so to speak. What were they working on that they sort of put aside? What do they have? Because I was looking for stuff to publish. And I was told the story about New Frontier and how it was stopped being published. And it was interesting because at that moment, I was looking for something to showcase Darwin also because we weren't clicking on some of the other series, and I was looking for a place to really showcase his talent. And I hit the New Frontier book, and I'm like, this is the most beautiful thing I've seen. Why is this in a drawer? Why is it going to be made? And I heard the story, and I said, bullshit, basically. That makes no sense. Bottom line is that we're going to make this, by the time this book comes out, the continuity will change anyway. But it's not tied to anything. It's a standalone. So let's build it as a standalone because ultimately it's going to look beautiful as a finished book on a bookshelf somewhere. So Darwin and Mark finished the series, and it was extraordinarily successful. And in some ways is a bit of a template for who the Justice League really is. Because I always look for books that I could say, if there's a new fan, where do you refer them to? Where do you go to read? What would I see? If I want to know it, and I always send people to Hush for Batman or Dark Knight Returns for Batman, and for Justice League, there's 1 or 2 books in there. But that New Frontier is one of the quintessential Justice League books.
Yes, it's amazing.
Something that we always do, and now Mario mentioned that here was very cherished, the JLI. They also published the Flash book, the Wally West Flash book.
Yeah. Who's Wally West? Was that a character at DC? I'm sorry.
Yeah. It was a character of DC. Oh. Yeah, but this one too. Okay. Mario, please do me the honor.
Okay, I'll do the honors. I told this story to Jeff a few days ago, and this is a story. Here in Argentina, they published Mike Baron, a series of Wally West Flash, but they couldn't use the name Flash because here in Argentina was a publication called Flash.
Okay.
So they had to change the name.
Okay.
And the name of the superhero was.
I'm gonna show you the
number 1 issue.
I'm excited. Flush man? No wonder that book was in the toilet.
Especially for reading in the toilet.
In case you run out of paper. I don't know. Yeah, you know, that was an interesting moment when Wally first took over, and he was a fascinating character.
Yeah.
And for me, what my problem was with Wally West, I'm sorry to say this, guys, I still have to dredge this stuff up. My problem with Wally West was that by the time I was there, he was very much Barry Allen light. He was almost the same character. He was getting married again. He has, with all this stuff going on, he was doing and acting the same way. And the early ones, that early Flash that you just held up, the Mike Barron one, he was grittier. He was, he was self-absorbed. He was, he had a fight to hold his power. So they just started getting into the Flash mode. But the good part for me about Flash, and I'll say this now, is because you saw Jeff. Jeff and I bonded over Flash, believe it or not. Jeff was one of the first. When I started at DC, not many people I was interacting with, but Jeff reached out to me and said, "You're a new guy. You have background. I'm struggling." He said, "I'm trying to figure out what to do with Flash. Would you want to talk to me about that?" And I said, "Sure." So what I did is I went back and I literally read like years worth of Jeff Flash books, and I saw a lot of things that I thought could be improved. And we sat and talked, and you could see him getting, we were getting it and really clicking in this conversation. And I think that's where we bonded over Flash. And ultimately that led to the ignition story, which was the restart of that Flash line, which I thought at that point I was really happy with what we were doing there with that character. But that was a good time for us. I still think, honestly, Mark Waid told every great story possible, Wally West, to be honest with you. That Return of Barry Allen story is probably one of the best Flash stories for Wally West that I've ever read. So I always used to joke, you can't have a crisis without killing a Flash.
Yeah. But it's true. It's true.
It's true.
Believe it or not, some people take offense to that. But I'm shallow. I'll go for the cheap laugh every time. But there's something interesting about generational characters, and I think Flash represents generational characters to me in every way possible.
Well, talking about the Flashman, recently we told the story in a show with Jeremy Adams here in Protagonistas el Comic. Mm-hmm. So we talked to Jeremy about the Flashman story, and he put Flashman in the story and in the continuity nowadays in Flash 781. So they put us.
That's why, here's what I say to everybody: just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Okay, and I used to say that to the writers a lot. Okay, my other favorite statement is, "It seemed like a good idea at the time. This one, not so much."
And then after the New 52, you had an awesome era that was the Rebirth era.
Right.
That was incredible. It was incredible, returning to the roots, legacy, etc. But when you begin to transit your last days on working for DC, mm-hmm. you pitch something that really, really, really got me very interesting on what it was going to be, and I was kind of disappointed when it didn't come up.
Yeah,
it was the 5G.
I know all about it. I got it in my garage. There was a lot of things that were going to happen. I could tell you there was a lot planned. There's a lot of thoughts involved in there. My logic was that I accepted the fact that it's a generational universe. Okay. But it can never be a generational universe unless Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman age. The problem for the DC universe has always been that we add generations around every characters around except our three main characters. And because of that, we have to constantly reboot around them so that everything feels consistent again. So the only way we could straighten that out is put Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman into the same timeline and the same aging timeline as all the other characters. So the entire editorial staff worked together when we built a timeline that really laid out from the appearance of the first superhero to ultimately what would become the 5G. And I looked at the generations, and it goes to your Justice League, believe it or not, strangely enough. And I got to see if I can remember this correctly, because this is where because I had it all mapped down. But the first generation was built around the JSA. Second generation was built around Justice League. The third generation was built around Justice League International. The fourth generation was built around the New 52. And the fifth generation was going to be the new ones that we're about to create. And the logic was those versions of Justice Leagues represented the resets around those periods of time and showed the versions of each character that existed at that moment. And if I could create a timeline that shows the progression from JSA all the way through, then I can drop in all the characters and stories around that. And that's what we did. And we built that timeline. And the thing was that we were going to do this without a slaughter fest. We weren't killing characters. This was about showing characters in their ages and moments and moving forward. And we were going to transition a bunch of the characters out and have new characters take on the roles. Not that they were dying, but literally handing the mantle over to new characters in their story. And I actually brought in and was going to build a weekly series. I don't know if anybody knows this. This might be the first time I ever say this. We were working on a new weekly series. I had Greg Rucka, Brian Bendis, Matt Fraction, and Kelly Sue DeConnick working on a pitch that was going to be a weekly series that was going to take us out of the end of Generation 4 into the beginning of Generation 5. I had a lot of teams reinventing and rethinking who the characters were going to be. Jeff Lemire had a brilliant take on a brand new interpretation of Green Lantern that was built on the Green Lantern from the Tangent universe, believe it or not, the Lantern.
Oh,
and we were going to give the Green Lantern Corps a rest for a little while and bring these guys in. And we were going to get rid of the rings and the Green Lanterns because they're fearless. We're going to have to become heroes without the rings, and then we're going to be setting up groups and teams that were basically not powered by rings, but powered by their sheer willpower of wanting to be heroes. Natural stuff like that. And then my big thing was the big transition was the Superman, Batman, and Damian story. And I was setting Damian up. To become the new Ra's al Ghul because he was going to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. And the logic, here's the logic was, it was going to be Luke Fox, which it was going to be Luke Fox as Batman. It was going to be John Kent as Superman and Damian as Ra's al Ghul. And the logic was that there was animosity between Damian and Luke because the idea that somebody else took on the Batman mantle was upsetting to him. And I wanted to set up that Superman Ra's al Ghul relationship like it were Magneto and Professor X, two friends, because Damian wasn't going to be a villain. He was doing it his way. He was seeing the removal of the borders between worlds and just making it one country, one world. And he was the one who was going to help pull it all together, following in his grandfather's footsteps. And it was going to set up this weird triangle between the three of them. At the same time, Batman was okay. Honestly, guys, it's the first time I ever told the story. Batman, Bruce Wayne leaves Gotham ultimately because what happens is that Joker kills Bane and tells Joker says he did it on Batman's request, and because Batman could have stopped him and didn't. And ultimately, when Bane dies, Batman realizes he's got Bane's blood on his hand, and he starts to shut down all the different places. And I think a piece of that sort of wound up out there somewhere. But the idea was that Batman didn't want to be in Gotham anymore. He leaves the city and he goes on this international journey. He's out. At the same time, Superman realizes that his power battery, you know how he charges up because of all the sun energy? He's not like any other battery cell. It's starting to wear down. It's not holding a charge, and he's losing his powers. And that was the logic behind why he creates the Authority, is that he knows he's losing his powers, so he's trying to bring heroes into place that he believes has his share of sensibilities and logic to take his place. So as the story goes, Batman captures Joker, and Joker reveals to the world that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And then Batman gets arrested for the murder of Bane and gets put on trial. And Superman, basically, with the Authority, breaks Batman out because he doesn't believe he should be put on trial. And then, then Damian and John and Luke put aside their differences and they realize they got to bring the parents back into justice, so that they have to apply by this system. And it puts the older heroes versus the younger heroes.
Oh my God!
And that was 5G.
Oh my God!
I'm gonna resume what I think with this commentary. Restore the 5G.
That was 5G. That was what it was. That's where we were going.
Some parts of what you told us, it was used in actual DC.
You know, it's funny. I haven't. Nothing against the creators and the people involved, because especially those are people I actually helped bring into the company. But I didn't read it. I knew what it was supposed to be, and if you see it in some sort of bastardized form, there's nothing enjoyable about it. So it just makes you frustrated. So no reason to be frustrated. You got more things to do.
Dan, how now you spoke about the industry. How you see the comic industry today?
I see. I see it's an interesting transitional period. I got in when I got into comics in this. Really got into comics in the 70s. There was superheroes, but there was romance, there was war, there was westerns, and there was science fiction, and there was horror, and there's a lot of stuff. And I always tell the story that DC Comics in the 70s was only 40% superhero and 60% other, which is great. And right now, the industry feels like 60% other, which is great. I think the pricing makes people a little more judicious about what they purchase. So therefore, they're being much more careful about what they buy. And therefore, they're also buying things that they have enjoyed in the past, meaning creators that they want to follow and ideas and types of stories they want to follow. They're not as beholden to the big companies as they used to be. And that's good and bad, because the big companies also was the boats that used to carry it, so everybody moved along. So now everybody's just got to fight their way through, which is probably good just the same. So that's good. I don't like, and I will continue not to like, variant covers. I think that's the bane to comics. Can't take the collector aspect out. I think it eats up too much time, money, and energy, and takes the focus off of reading the books and enjoying them. And I'm hoping that at some point some people realize that they're just selling to very few people at a high price, a cover, when they should be selling to a lot of people at a lower price, a readable, enjoyable comic. And once we get back to that spot, then I think the industry will be in exactly where it should be again. Well, I think it's going to get there. I think it's going to get there. There's a lot of talk about digital and digital this and digital that, and digital will always be part of comics, but it'll never replace it. Print sales in the last couple of years have never been higher, because in a world where we're all online 24 hours a day, there's no better way to disconnect and just enjoy yourself than to read a book or read a comic book. And to hold it in your hand. And when I started this company with Frank Miller Presents, and we did this Ashcan, we purposely did it on newsprint, the first book. And the reason why we did that is we wanted people to feel something that felt like a comic again. And when I got the box in my office, I opened it up and it smelled like comics. And I don't know what to tell you. It's a weird thing to say, but it made me feel good. It made me feel like we made the right choice. It made me reconnect, because when your senses are working, the physical touch, the smell, the sight of these books, It reminded me of everything I love about comics, and that's sort of what Frank and I are doing. Frank has nothing to prove. And I'm kind of good too. I'll be honest with you. Did a lot. But we're doing this because we're having fun, and we're not doing the variants, and we're not doing all the things that we don't like about comics. We're doing what we do like about comics. And we hope we find an audience. And if we do, that's great, and we'll do more. If we don't find an audience, that's okay too, because we did what we wanted to do, and we tried the way we believed it should be. And if that's not what comics are, that's okay. But it doesn't take away from what we enjoy about it, and that's what the type of book we're making.
How is working with Frank?
Absolutely fascinating. As you can imagine, the people you should ask are the artists. He's hands-on. And it's wonderful. Because I heard this from Andy Kubert about how he learned from Frank by working on Dark Knight 3. And the same thing with Philip Tan. The artist that Philip Tan was at the start of Ronin and the artist he'll be at the end of Ronin will be two different people. And Philip's absorbing everything. And that's one of the reasons why Frank's doing layouts that I could have published, but he doesn't want it. He wants to let other people learn from what he's doing and see them be published in his place. The books that he cares the most about are the Sin City books. That's his baby. He keeps on telling me, that's my baby. Don't touch my baby. And I said, I'm not going to touch your baby. But he's involved in everything. In the book that I'm doing, Ancient Enemies, that's my baby in a weird way. But it's again, he created a character for me to insert. And the reason why I say that is what's fascinating is that he created a character that was so visually different than everything else I do. And he forced me out of my comfort spot because I was working in a very set way of doing business. And all of a sudden he throws the geek character in the middle of this thing, like dropping a bomb in the middle. And it forced me to rethink the mechanics of the visuals of it. And how do we find ways to make characters more visually interesting instead of more repetitive? And that's a good thing. And when you're at an advanced age like myself, or with an artist with 15, 20 years experience, and you're still learning, there's no better feeling in the world. It justifies why you're doing certain books other than just cashing a check,
Dan, and what challenges awaits for you and Frank with this new editorial seal?
It's, like I said, we're working against the grain a little bit. We're trying things that are very subtle too. We've changed the coloring on the book. We've gone with a very, very desaturated palette. So I think comics look like mud these days. I think the coloring is overdone. I think just because you can use a color doesn't mean you should use a color. Just because you have a computer with 3,000 colors on it, you shouldn't put them all on the same page on the same character. I think you have to be smarter about what we do. I think what we're trying to do is craft. It's not, it's not about old style storytelling. It's about the craft of comics, what makes comics work. A lot of people like to reinvent the rules without understanding what the rules were in the first place or why they were there. You can only break things if you understand how they work. You can't break things and just think that it makes sense that you're being radical or different. You have to understand how things work first. And sometimes it's okay to break things, and sometimes it actually is broken when you break things. And the only way you know the difference is by understanding the business and the craft that you're in, and learning. And as long as we're learning and challenging ourselves, I'm learning. I had a huge staff putting out comics for me. Now I'm doing it myself. I'm learning how to do the physicality of it all. And I'm going to say this on air right now. If anybody from DC is listening, thank you very much. You guys killed yourselves with all the crazy shit I threw at you. And it's really appreciated, because this is a hell of a lot of work to make a comic book. I have to say, it really is.
Dan, and what can we expect in future projects from Frank Miller Presents? Well, besides Ancient Enemies and
we got 4 more books that we're polishing up right now. They're very, very silly. We start with the silly idea, and we laugh about it. And then all of a sudden, the more we talk about it, the more real it becomes, until we start assigning people to help us make it. And then we're like, why are we doing this book? And then we look at it and we say, hey, this is pretty good. So I got a bunch. It's probably in October. I'll be talking about them a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, well, like I said, all my effort is right now. It's on Ancient Enemies. It's on Ronin. We have a series called Pandora that's being done by Emma Kubert, Andy Kubert's daughter. It's beautiful. It's a young adult book, completely different from the other two. One's science fiction fantasy. The other one it's mature science fiction fantasy. My book is pretty much superhero. This one is more young adult fantasy. And then Frank has basically, I'm not allowed to call it the origin story of Sin City. I get yelled at. It's the origin story of Sin City. Set in the Old West, and then he's doing. Yeah, it's a Western. It's a Western.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We're doing a Western Sin City. It's the origin of Basin City, how it came to be, with a lot of the relatives, ancestors of the characters that we know from the Sin City series, and he's also doing a Sin City one shot with Mila Manera doing the art. So Frank is writing. So yeah, so that's our first set of books, and then we have about 4 more titles that we're hoping to have in 2023 following that.
Whoa. You really got me with the Sin City
prequel.
You really got me there.
With everyone, because I want to read Ancient Enemies too.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun. I'm working with Danilo Beirut. He is spectacular. He's doing all the heavy lifting. I'm giving him the story, but his layouts, his designs, his visual sense are everything that I wanted the book to be. I'm old school a little bit, so I wanted something that had the energy of a John Buscema book of the Marvel from the 60s, and this guy's delivering over and beyond expectation. He's doing a fabulous job.
Well, Dan, we want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate you spend some time with us, telling us these stories that for comic book fans like us are very precious, because we could hear hours of your stories.
I got the great part about it. There's a story behind every story. There always is. You know what I mean? You could name a book, and I could tell you the story behind the story. Which is a lot of fun, and and that's the enjoyable aspect of it all. And for me, like I said, I was a fan of comics as a whole and the business. And when I see people, like I always remember Jeanette Kahn when she first started at DC, and the effect she made. And she made a huge influence on me. And when I went to that company, I wanted to hit the ground running the same way she did, the same level of strength and audacity, I think, is a good way to put it. And and she had her challenges, she had her problems, and I never forgot. You go back and people talk about, she joins the company in 76. In 78, they have the implosion where it looks like the entire line's impacting, and then you get the 80s, which 80s I think really when DC found its voice for the future, and you get the books from Vertigo and all this stuff going on. I only hope that when people look at the body of work, they can see those moments there for what I did too, which would be great.
Yeah. What I was once realized when watching your trajectory, your career along the years, and it happened to me when I was preparing the interview. It's that your career on DC has for me two greatest points, that was bringing back the older readers to comics, getting new readers, and getting back again the old readers with Rebirth. And that was very important. And in a balance of all, I think it's a great trajectory for me. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you've done for comics, what
Yeah.
you've done for us comic book fans, and thanks for not killing Nightwing.
No, wasn't for lack of trying, buddy.
Dan, thank you so much.
The joke with Nightwing, I have to say this just because everybody brings it up. I have to say it. So the story with Nightwing's a true one, and what I said with Infinite Crisis. But the joke of killing Nightwing going on like this actually stems from a convention I did. So I was at a convention, and I told the story about how I wanted to kill Nightwing, and there was this girl in the second row with a Nightwing shirt on, and anytime I said I wanted to kill Nightwing, she would scream. Ah! She would throw her hands up in the air and scream. And we were shocked that somebody would react that way. So during the course of the panel, somebody said something about killing Nightwing, and on cue, this woman screamed every time. And she would yell every time about killing Nightwing. And we thought it was the funniest thing. So we made it part of our regular panel speeches that we would kill Nightwing, and it became a running gag to the point that everybody thinks that's the only thing we ever discussed. It was once it was over, it was done. I was already on to the next thing. I didn't really care anymore. But it's a fun story just the same.
Yes, cool.
Thank you. It's a pleasure speaking to you both.
Dan, thank you so much to having us. And as I always say to every writer and artist who came here to Protagonistas del Comic, you are the real hero, because without you, we don't have these stories that are so touching for us.
And
thank
honestly,
you so much.
We don't tell the stories without fans. It works both ways. You know what? We could never. One thing I always said is never take your fans for granted. They are the most loyal and the most fickle in the world, and we have to make sure we always keep them engaged and excited and wanting more. So there you are.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure. It was great talking to you both.
Well, please, Dan, stay. We're gonna close the show in Spanish.
Okay.
Muchas gracias, gente, por estar. Nada, tuvimos el honor de hablar con el señor Dan Didio. No sé vos más, Mario, pero yo estoy, la verdad que.
Yo estoy
más que
fascinado,
agradecido.
la verdad que estoy fascinado.
La verdad que pasamos. We had a great time with you.
Have a great time.
Así que, por favor, ya saben, dejen su like, apoyen este contenido, porque este contenido vale oro. Se lo digo yo, vale oro, y no porque sea el que sea Kai de Rayner Reviews, no. Vale oro.
Perdón, nos ha contado la primicia del 5G.
Nos ha contado lo de 5G, pues, así que bueno. Muchísimas gracias, gente. Nos estamos viendo en el próximo video, entrevista, y gracias por apoyar este contenido y estar ahí en el chat, sobre todo a los miembros que estuvieron ahí a full. Muchas gracias. Adiós.
Nos vemos.
Bye now, guys.